But first, it's the definition of insanity to do the same thing over and over again and yet expect a different result. This is what's happened to the federal coalition ever since they drank the climate Kool-Aid and fell into line with Scott Morrison's demand that they embrace net zero as he boarded a plane to the Glasgow Climate Summit. Now, for Morrison, this was the beginning of the end. After steadfastly refusing to follow Labor's lead on climate policy ever since 2010, here was the Liberal Party hitching its wagon to Labor's, all because its moderate faction told anyone who would listen that Me Tooing the left on climate would help them hang on to well-heeled inner-city seats that were under threat from this new brand of climate independence that we now know as the Teals. Well, Scott, how'd that go for you? Not so well, did it? The Libs lost big then and they've been losing ever since while continuing to hold fast to Labor's net zero position. There is a real lesson here on the political fundamental that policy and strategy has to connect with convictions. Where the coalition has had policies to protect the environment but also protect jobs and prosperity, think 2010, 2013 and 2019, it's done well. Where it's rolled over to Labor because some smart Alex told them that neutralising climate as an issue would help them, well, they have lost big, as they did in 2022 under Morrison and, of course, earlier this year. And today's news poll just confirms that story of woe. Never before has the coalition's primary vote been as low. A few weeks ago, when it was all at a previous low of 27%, Liberals argued with me that they had hit rock bottom. And they said from here on in, the vote would improve. I said, I disagree with you. I said, you'll only know you've hit rock bottom when you admit what you've got wrong and you set about trying to fix it. I said, you guys still can't admit that you've got climate policy as wrong as you have. And that unless you appreciate that energy and the economy are as instrumental to climate policy as anything else, that they all feed into one another, then your fall in the vote will continue. They said, but where's the base going to go? They've got nowhere to go, they said. Well, that was their first mistake because the base has found somewhere to go and they are going, as today's news poll makes clear. One Nation, the only party to consistently oppose net zero, has gone from 6% of a vote at the recent election to now 15% in news poll today. That is their best ever result. And that increase in the One Nation vote almost exactly mirrors the fall in the coalition's vote. Now, have they gone for good? Maybe not. Right now, it's as bad as it's been for the coalition in many, many years. And because politics is less tribal and more fickle than ever, there are no guarantees, even if policies were to change, they're going to get these voters back. Now, to be clear, I use the term coalition here tonight, but let's be a bit more accurate. This is the Liberal Party that's in trouble. It's the Liberal Party vote that's in freefall, and it's the Liberal Party's lack of direction that's the albatross around the coalition's neck. Look at what happened over the weekend. By a unanimous vote, the National Party dropped net zero. No ifs and buts, no qualifications, no aspiration. It is gone. In recent years, it's been the junior partner, hasn't it, leading the way in the coalition. On The Voice, it was the Nationals who took a position on principle to oppose a race-based change to our constitution. And it's been the Nationals in recent years that have held on to their seats when the Liberals have been reduced to a rump at a state level and now in Canberra. Given this record to date, given that their 4-year fling with net zero has brought them nothing but electoral pain, surely the Liberals would be smart enough to realise that net zero is best abandoned. On radio this morning, the National Party's Matt Canavan made the good point that net zero had never actually been formally adopted by the Joint Party Room, pretty much because it was a Scott Morrison's captain call in the lead-up to Glasgow.
When net zero was adopted 4 years ago, as you said, you can't understand why we did it. Well, in fact, there was no decision of the Liberal National Party Room. There's no debate, and the Liberal National Party Room was imposed by Scott Morrison as leader, and my recommendation is we work best as a group when we talk things out, debate things. That's how the parliament should work.
Now, back at the time, as Matt says, it was not formally adopted in the Joint Party Room. It was debated in the National Party Room. with the Nats only deciding on a margin of 12 votes to 9 to support net zero after winning a $20 billion regional package as a trade-off. Since then, the United States has abandoned net zero under a president who says climate change is a hoax. British Labor's Tony Blair has said that net zero is doomed to fail. Not one of the big emitters have reduced their emissions. Most of them too have rejected net zero. And just last week, Bill Gates, a long-time climate catastrophist, recanted the whole climate religion, saying that climate was not the biggest issue facing the world and that instead of obsessing over emissions reduction, this is Bill Gates, he said we should worry more about tackling poverty and disease. Even Scott Morrison, who forced the Libs into net zero, now says net zero at any cost, on any rigid timetable, is not policy, it's just ideology. In the wake of the Nats' weekend decision, Susan Lee reportedly had a 2-hour Liberal Party leadership meeting to discuss net zero. Now, supposedly, Senate Deputy Leader Ann Ruston told the meeting that it would be madness to scrap the net zero target and that the Nats, she said, were holding a gun to the Liberals' head. Don't know about that. I think the Nats are actually showing the Libs a way out of their current predicament. But if you want to arrest this diabolical slump in your polls, you Liberals have got to show some backbone. You've got to start to stand for something. You've got to stop the Me Tooing of Labor on something as critical as our energy and economic future. As someone who got the Liberal leadership by just one vote, Susan Lee is doubtless worried about the 20 or so Liberals who are supposedly wedded to net zero. But this is where the leader's better to be a leader than a follower. Given that the pursuit of net zero has driven up energy prices, it's closed down heavy industry and is now ruining vast tracts of our national parks and prime agricultural land, the Australian people deserve a clear choice at the next election. Given that Labor's energy policy means subsidising renewables to drive their take-up, then subsidising consumers to avoid bill shock, and then finally subsidising coal-fired power stations to keep the lights on, surely the Australian people deserve to be offered a sane energy policy. And if the Libs are going to dump net zero, the sooner they do it, the better, given they will have to argue the case day in, day out until polling day. Yes, Susan Lee became the leader relying on the votes of the Liberal left, but by taking a clear position against net zero, she can cement her position by showing that she's capable of tough decisions, not just fighting about T-shirts and Kevin Rudd, but the stuff that really matters to real people. The worst possible outcome would be to play for time on an issue that's been around for at least a decade. I mean, she's been in the Parliament for 25 years. She should have a clear position here. Nor can she afford to fudge what should be a position she owns with conviction. I mean, you're either going to stand up to the global climate alarmists or you're not. You're either ready to protect Australia's economic future or you're not. This is not about taking the Liberal Party to the right, as some today are trying to claim. People who've probably never voted Liberal in their life. This is about making the Liberal Party again. Because right now, if this persists, if the party persists with this green left Me Tooing of Labor on climate, it's just managing its decline. I mean, wake up and get focused on the economic fundamentals. If they do that, the Libs might have a chance, but that's how serious it is now. This is not about the future direction of the party. It's about whether the Liberals can survive at all.